live and direct from the internet and from the Tribe Wellness Office and Pro Shop, we bring to you Tales of Adventure. Many of you know our friend John. He is a Tai Chi student at Tribe Wellness and a world traveler. And John is ready to share with us a great story. This all came about, or at least our discussion of it did, maybe about a year ago. John said something in class to the effect of, there's a famous race in Texas called the Hotter Than Hell 100-mile race. He mentioned that he was only going to do 100K. And we all thought, well, that's kind of intense. 100 kilometers, that's a long way to go. And he said, well, you know, I biked across Africa once. And then we were fortunate enough to see the map that he brought in and see this is a real thing. So I don't want to waste any more of John's time. I'm going to mute myself and anybody else that joins us. And we are ready, John, for you to share with us your adventure from bicycling the length of the continent of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for the opportunity to share some of my joys with the group. This is a story of a wonderful adventure I experienced in the first half of 2009, bicycling the length of Africa from Cairo, Egypt to Cape Town, South Africa, through 10 countries. Okay, let's get the right things going here. There's a map that shows the route. And here are some statistics. I did it in January through May. It's conducted by an organization called Tour d'Afrique that conducts cross-continent bicycling adventures. And we went over 7,000 miles for these 10 countries. There's 120 days of cycling. We average 75 miles a day. The shortest was 42 miles. The longest was 127 miles. We biked 4 to 5 days, then we rested days, and I took several side trips. And there's more photos in my complete story of over 1,000 pictures. If you just Google John Davis Africa bicycle, the first length is bicycling the length of Africa. So we start off with Egypt. This is a picture of the group. There were 50 of us, and 40 of us made the entire trip because not everybody could take 4 months off. I am over here on the edge of the picture. And we start off by bicycling through the pyramids. And in that group, there were from 10 different countries around the world. There were only 4 from the United States, many from Canada, some from England, Scotland, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, South Africa, and so forth. And there I am next to the Sphinx. I'm riding next to the Red Sea. Our directions for that day was keep the Red Sea on your left because there's a single road that we're riding on and we're headed south. Most of the time I was riding alone. I was the slowest rider in the group. And also, I was also the oldest rider in the group. I started the ride at 70 years old and completed it at 71. And it took a whole year to train for it. I set my goal to ride this, and it took a whole year of training and a whole year of preparation. But I finally did it, and I'm glad I did it. We camped along the way. This is a desert camp. Most of our camps were like this with no facilities, meaning no showers and no toilets. So we had shovels available, and you would just go off in the distance to take care of things and squat like the natives do. From time to time, we would come to what is called a coke stop. This day would have some soft drinks, tea, coffee, and sometimes snacks or fruit. And there we are now. I'm the one with the Witches and Black March vest. We saw lots of irrigated fields tended by hand labor. I saw no tractors. There was lots of sugar cane growing. Here's a cart full of some being pulled by a donkey. And they're hand loading it up on the railroad tracks. Many buildings we saw were unfinished. It looked like the first floor was occupied and the people were living and working in it, but the top still had these rebars sticking out from overhead. I was told that they don't impose taxes until the building is finished. So there are many, many unfinished buildings. We had a rest day at Luxor. Here I am cleaning my bike. You have to get the dirt and the sand and the grit off the chain and the gears to keep the bicycle working properly. That afternoon, some of us walked to Karnak, which is more than a temple. It's really a complex of sanctuaries, pylons, and obelisks. And it was built and rebuilt and enlarged and decorated over 1,500 years. Karnak was begun in the Middle Kingdom. And this is the entrance to it. This is a pharaoh with his arms crossed, which indicates death. Also, his size indicates hierarchy. In front of the male is his female bride. I have no idea how they were able to build these giant columns. Our next country was Sudan. Here we are riding on a nice smooth road, but it ended after a while. We got into construction. And here's a kind of a sandy road, a dirt road, and then a rocky road. You're going to see a lot of road pictures because that's what we were doing, is bicycling. Here's a very dusty one. We were coming into one of the various villages. The name of this one was called Abri. I don't see any trees around at all. This is one of our riders, Ann Gallagher, with a couple of the children there. Many of the children take English in school, and so we could communicate a little bit. Two kids on a donkey. This is a road that I hated riding on, and there were a lot of them. It's like a corrugated washboard, and you're going over and you're going bumpity, 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 bump. And you go from one side and say, it looks smoother here. Well, it wasn't, so you go to the other side. Well, it wasn't smooth there. So you just had to stick with one side. And you're going bumpity bump no matter what you do. And sometimes we couldn't ride. You can't ride a bicycle in this deep sand. You just have to walk. And similarly here. More road under construction. I don't know if you call this a road or not, but that's where our path was. Along the way, we met many, many kids coming up from school or going to school. And they're all very friendly. The young girls are not shy. They come right up to you and reach out their hand and look you straight in the eye and say hello. Here's some local transport. And if you are stuck somewhere, like you have to change a flat tire or something like that, and they come along, they ask two questions. The first question is always, do you need any water? And the second question is, do you need any help? And they will always help you whether you need it or not. So I had 19 flat tires during this trip, and so I got some help changing the tires because they wanted to make my experience enjoyable, and they wanted to show their hospitality. Here we are crossing the Nile on a ferry. Here's a herd of camels on the Sahara Desert. Who would have thought that I would be riding my bicycle on the Sahara Desert? This is just a guy on a cart with some greens. I don't know what they are, but I love the photography in this picture here with the white donkey and the pink harness and the greens. Here's another one of our desert camps. Now this, we were in Khartoum for a rest day. And that night, as I was lying in my tent, I heard this pounding, which sounded like someone on a giant treadmill. Thump, thump, thump. I got up, and there was a group of 80 to 100 Sudanese soldiers who were staying in barracks next to our camp area. They were circled around a few of them who were doing some kind of stock dancing, accompanied by hand clapping and chanting. I learned later they were dancing the Kerrang, which is a traditional dance in the Nubia Mountains. They invited us to join them, and many of us did, including me. We got out and stomped with them. I did some version of the electric slide, which is a country western dance, which they liked. Two of the biker women were invited over to dance with them. Here is Judy. And I took a flash so you can see the reflection in all their eyeballs. They were extremely pleased that we accepted their hospitality and joined them. The leader called it quits at 11 p.m. One of the writers from Germany, Werner, is active in the YMCA where he lives. They, along with the Canadian YMCA, support a school in Khartoum. He arranged a tour of them, and about 15 of us went. They showed us around and hosted us for the rest of the afternoon. There's about 330 children in the school, many of them orphans. The school goes through age 12. At night, the children go home to their families or foster parents or folks who just take them in. I don't think it's too formalized. Of course, I could not resist holding Misa. She had the sweetest smile, and I was ready to take her home with me. As you can see, I've started to grow a beard. I decided not to shave at all on this 4-month trip. That's one more thing I didn't have to pack for or worry about. Here's a man making mud bricks. He's setting them out in the sun to cure. They will be used for walls and fences. I stopped to chat with these 5 women who were not shy. They asked me where I was from. And initially in this trip, when the kids would say, "Where are you from?" I would say the United States. They had no idea what that was. Then I started to say America. Oh, yes, we knew all about America. They asked where I was going, and I recited 10 countries we were cycling through, and I got them to repeat them as we went along. Then they asked me how old I was, and I had held up 10 fingers and said 10, and they repeated, and then 20, 30, and so forth. And when I got to 70, I stroked my beard, and they all laughed. Then one of the women held up her hand and kept pointing to her ring finger. I couldn't figure out what she was talking about. I finally figured out they wanted to know if I was married. So I took off my bicycle gloves and showed them my bare hand and smiled. Everybody giggled. At the end of our conversation, the woman on the left in the picture proudly declared, "We are Sudanese," after I said, "I am American." Throughout Sudan, the people, especially the children, were so friendly and polite and courteous and welcoming. I have very fond memories of that atmosphere. Our next country is Ethiopia. I assume that many of you have traveled somewhere where you had to go through immigration and customs. And most of the time it's in a nice new airport with shiny buildings and shiny desks and everything else. Well, here's our entrance to Ethiopia. They are starting to build a new building, but for now we had to go through the fence and through the barbed wire gate into this building. And there's a mud and straw building about 15 by 15 feet. And our first road in Ethiopia was this road right here. And then we came upon a paved road, a new paved road. And notice the juxtaposition, a modern paved road, and who's on the road? A donkey pulling a cart, and a person, I can't tell if it's a man or a woman, carrying some buckets with a yoke across their shoulders. I saw lots of these huts where people lived. In Ethiopia, there are kids, and more kids, and they seem to spring up out of nowhere. I would be riding down the road, and off in the distance, about 200 yards down the road, I would see a boy or two or three running pell-mell across the field to intersect me. I understand that the average birth rate is 5 children. In the rural areas where 84% of the population lives, it's more like 6 or 7. And unfortunately, I expect 2 or 3 not to make it to adulthood. At a lunch stop, a group had just left school and gathered around to watch us. They had never seen anything like us before. It's like when the circus comes to town. I always would try to interact with them. I would go up to one of them and say, "My name is John. What is your name?" And they would understand as they are being taught English. Most places in the world, the children are taught English as a second language. I looked at some of the notebooks. These were away from school. And this girl on the right with a beautiful smile, they all have beautiful smiles, but the one on the right showed me her notebook. She was 12 years old. It was biology, and she had sketched very accurately the human reproductive process along with the fetus in the womb at a couple of stages. That's at 12 years old. We camped in sight of a beautiful mountain range. This is a market in the town of Gondor. And of course, I forgot to mention, on this trip, there were 2 trucks that carried our tents and our camp gear. There was a bicycle mechanic, there was a cook, and there were 2 nurses, along with some other folks on the staff of Tour d'Afrique. So as we would come to the major cities, our cook would go out and buy food so he could prepare it to service. Here is a man who wanted to help me. Some of the hills were too steep for me to bicycle up, and so I would start walking up the hill with my bike. And he insisted that he push my bike for me. So I let him. They were also helpful and very, very friendly. Most everybody there in Ethiopia, out in the country, has a stick. They use a stick to tend their cows and their sheep and their goats and the donkeys. It was also used to help carry a load on their back. This young man is carrying a load of teff, T-E-F-F, which is an indigenous grain to Ethiopia, and it's used to make injera, which is a spongy flat bread. It's like a big, huge taco. Here are people walking, walking, walking. Again, on a nice paved road. I think this is market day. Here are two women carrying loads on their backs on the way to market. And you think that's tough? How about this lady carrying all these sticks on her back? And you think that's tough? How about that lady there with a bale of a whole bunch of stuff on her back? These are human beasts of burden. This is what I call a 2-cow plow with a wooden stick for the plow. And that's the hut that that farmer lives in. It seems like the people here are living in the Middle Ages or in a pre-industrial civilization. After the grain is harvested, it is threshed. Here are cattle walking over the grain around and around to crack the kernels of teff. I asked someone, what happens if the cows urinate on the grain? I did not get an answer. Now the grain is winnowed, where it is thrown up in the air so the wind can blow away the chaff. The grain is then bagged and taken to a mill to be ground into flour, which is either taken to market to sell or brought home to use. There are water wells scattered about. Here, the water is hand pumped into these jugs, into these containers, and they're loaded onto donkeys and carried up the hill to the villages, to the houses in the villages. There's no privacy with a constant or audience. You just have to ignore them. Here we are at lunch, and most of the time we would put up a perimeter rope. It's this little yellow rope right along here, and they would respect it. Except we had a different kind of watchers. When these cows did not respect the rope we had. Do you know what this is? This is a termite mound. We saw lots of them along the way. They're very tall. This is the tallest one that I saw. This is our last day in Ethiopia. Those are acacia trees, which giraffes eat. Now we're going to go into Kenya. Kenya greeted us with a very rough road, unpaved. I saw monkeys and baboons and dik-diks. Dik-diks is a kind of antelope. There's some goats hovering under a tree for shade. That's my tent in the foreground. And we are camped at a place that we call Lava Rock Camp. It's so called because all the rocks came from some ancient volcanoes. We rode past some of the old calderas that were huge. We set up camp early afternoon. Then the sun started moving in, and you can see coming in. And the wind started blowing. And the dust started blowing and coming. I was covered with fine dust, including my hair. And everything in the tent was covered with fine dust also. But then a storm came with the water. and many people got rained out. Fortunately, my Boy Scout training was operating when I chose my tent site, as I consciously avoided what looked like low spots or runoff paths. So the only thing that got wet was my rain tarp. We rode around this beautiful rock formation. Here is the road when it was mostly sand. Notice there are no straight bicycle tracks. And now we're at the equator in Malawi. Each town has its market. It's like an outdoors Walmart. You can get anything you want to, from food to clothing to appliances. Here's another market in Nairobi. Sometimes during our rest days, I was able to stay in hotels or hostels or B&Bs, and they often had mosquito netting over the bed. In this hotel, despite the net, I got about a dozen bites in the night, and I couldn't figure out why. I kept waking up and putting on more cortisone cream. Well, I noticed that I kicked the covers down to the bottom of the bed, and it opened up the mosquitoes net, and the mosquitoes probably knew that was going to happen, so they were just waiting on it. And this is the very worst road entirely on the entire trip, if you want to call it a road, but that's what it was. Our next country is Tanzania. And in Tanzania, it's when I celebrated my 71st birthday. It was March 10th when we got there. That's my birth date. And so I took a 3-day, 2-night safari in Tanzania, in the Serengeti Desert. We didn't see huge herds like in a migration, but more small herds and singles and doubles. Here's a buffalo. It's a huge animal. This is a spotted hyena. Sometimes at our campsites, when we had ribs or steak, we would bury the bones, but the hyenas would come and dig up the bones and eat them. Their jaws will crush the bones. I think they look ugly the way they seem to slink with short hind legs. This is a wildebeest. Wildebeest is Dutch for wild beast. We drove by a pond of hippopotamuses and a lot of zebras. The way the safari works is that we drive around with the driver knowing where likely spots where certain animals hang out. Other drivers on other safaris are doing the same thing. When one spots something interesting, he radios the other drivers, who then drive their vans over to the same place. There's a lot of cooperation among the various tour companies. Also, if we see a cluster of vans, we rush over to see what they are seeing. The animals just totally ignore us. So, we are in their place. These lions were the highlight of the safari. We saw them right next to the road, walking slowly. And I want you to notice the gleam in his eye. It's that season. right in front of us on the road, and on the lower left corner of this picture, you can see that's where the Jeep is that we're in. So we're right next to them. It was rather swift. We were told that after about 15 minutes, they do it again, and then repeat it several times. As he mounts her, he bites the nape of her neck. I don't know if that relaxes her or not, but I just know that when cats carry their kittens, they lift them by the nape of the neck, and the kittens just relax. Then when he withdraws, she snarls and bats him with her paw. I learned later that the lion's penis is barbed, and it irritates her when he pulls out. Evidently, the lioness hasn't drawn a connection between his going and his coming out. Wow, I would be tired too. I'm just right next to him. It's amazing. As we were leaving the crater for the day, a herd of elephants walked right through our little caravan. They are such beautiful animals. Here are some vultures feeding on a dead wildebeest. And these birds are really big. We are now at the entrance to the Fairgate National Park. Serengeti is the Maasai word for endless plain. Some Maasai folks at the entrance posed for tourists, for money, of course. I broke down and negotiated a price because previous requests of other Maasai resulted in denials, which I honored, and I wanted a picture. Anytime I took a picture of people, I always asked them first, may I take a picture? And they always, except for these folks, they always said yes. These are Thompson gazelles. This is a cheetah. My second big safari thrill was watching a mother cheetah catch a gazelle to feed her 4 cubs. She would walk casually, then pause, then walk purposefully while culling a Thompson's gazelle from the rest of the herd. Then the chase was on. I couldn't take a picture because they were in tall grass. You could see the gazelle running and kicking up its hind legs. Even though a gazelle can run as fast as 50 miles an hour, the cheetah is the fastest land animal on Earth, usually running 75 miles an hour with short bursts of over 100. And we saw it gradually catch up to its prey. Then, after a brief struggle, no movement. She then dragged the kill to her 4 cubs for their meal. The safari is over, and the next day I am on my bicycle. Here are a couple of baboons crossing the road in front of me. We were told, if you come upon a baboon, do not look it in the eye, because they will take it as a challenge, and they will show you who the alpha is. And I know it's not me. Ernest Enns, a retired professor of mathematics from Canada, and I decided to do something different. While the rest of the group will spend 3 days bicycling from Dodoma to Iringa, he and I decided to spend an extra day in Dodoma relaxing, then spend the day on a local bus from Dodoma to Iringa, then spend an extra day relaxing in Iringa while waiting for the group to arrive. This is the bus terminal in Dodoma. It looks chaotic, but it works quite well. The folks there are quite helpful and will give you all the guidance you need to find the right office and the right bus. You just have to keep asking for what you want. Each bus has its own office. And often the bus doesn't leave until it's full. There's no time schedule. here we are paying our money. That's Ernest. They're writing out our receipts by candlelight, even though it's the middle of the day. And just like the local small businesses here, the local small businesses there support their high school sports teams. Okay, in a few days, we're off again. A nice smooth road. It looks like it is a rainy season. Actually, during this 4 months, I only got rained on 2 or 3 times. Next, we go to Malawi. And just like in the other countries, we are objects of attention. And when we store our bicycles, we store them upside down, so because the bicycles don't have kickstands. So everybody has a lock, and we usually link 2 or 3 bicycles together just to keep honest people honest. But the watchers in Malawi were very polite and did not try to come into the camp area. So I'm bicycling along, and I saw this pig being carried on a bike. And I turned around so I could take a picture. Then the guy slapped the pig, and it squirmed and squealed. I did not know it was alive. We rode by Lake Malawi. This is a picture of myself and of Tony Wheeler. Tony Wheeler and his wife were the ones that co-founded the Lonely Planet. It's a worldwide tour guide, and I use it a lot in my travels. But he came and joined us for a little bit on the tour. Here are women carrying their babies in slings on their back. There were no strollers. This is how you carried your babies. I walked into the town nearby, and here is a miller milling, grinding grain into flour. Here's a butcher shop. I love this picture because these 2 men seemed so proud and so dignified. Here are 2 happy tailors. And they did not have electricity here, but they had foot treadles to turn the sewing machines. Our next country is Zambia. This is the shower at the campsite on our second night in Zambia. They would heat water, fill containers with it. Then these boys would lift the water to the top of a 55-gallon drum. A pipe from the bottom of the drum went into the shower building where the water would come out. There was no shower head. The water just came out of a pipe when you opened the valve. Here's a cluster of thatched roof houses. A little village, or maybe it's a tribe. There are many roadside stands. Here's one of the larger ones. This was the season for potatoes, pumpkins, and squash. And I think they might have sold those rocks too. Several of us took time out to visit Victoria Falls. This is my first view of it. The falls are on the Zambezi River, which is the 4th longest river in Africa. And it's on the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. The falls are almost twice as wide as Niagara Falls and twice as high. During the peak flow period between March and May, which is when we were there, the water spray is so dense that everything is hidden in the midst. The thunder of the falling water can be heard for miles. The native name for the falls is Musioatunya, which means the smoke that thunders. Here is the bridge across the river below the falls. Several of the riders went bungee jumping from it. It's supposedly the third highest bungee jump in the world. And no, I did not jump. A few of us crossed the bridge to Zimbabwe. And the reason we did is we wanted to have high tea at the Victoria Falls Hotel on the Zimbabwe side. It was built during British colonial times and still has that manicured and proper atmosphere. Here we're being served high tea and pastries. High tea refers to afternoon tea with finger sandwiches, scones, and pastries. And if somebody invites you to high tea, that's what you could expect. If somebody invites you to tea, they're inviting you to dinner. Here we are back to cycling, and we took a ferry across the Zambezi River to enter Botswana. And this is my bicycle right here. As mentioned, I had 19 flat tires. I also took 2 extra sets of tires. And I had spare tubes, but I had a lot of patch kits. Now we're going to Botswana. Here's one of my fellow cyclists on what is called the Elephant Highway. It's called the Elephant Highway for a reason, as elephants are often seen here. And there's the evidence. But up ahead, I saw this big bull elephant crossing the road. And bear in mind that I am riding all by myself. I got where he was there and I stopped. He was eating grass. And I was very close, maybe only 10 yards away. That's like 30 feet. It's not very, it's like from one end of the tribe wellness place to the other. I stopped, and as I was taking pictures, he turned toward me. He snorted, he flapped his ears, and took a step backwards. Well, I can read body language like that. I didn't know if he was going to charge or what. I must have been in his space. So I went back, so I got on my bicycle and pedaled as fast as I could. Fortunately, he did not chase me. Even sprinting on a bicycle, you cannot run an elephant or most wild animals. But then, about 50 yards down the road, I came across this watering hole and saw 5 elephants peacefully drinking water. One was a young one, and they're such beautiful animals. I cannot understand why people kill them for sport or for their tusks or other body parts. Several of us took a day trip to the Okavango Delta, located in northern Botswana. That's Ernest Enns and me, and we're getting ready to go on a plane. Okavango Delta is the world's largest inland delta. It's formed where the Okavango River empties into a swamp where most of the water is lost to evaporation. It covers an area of about 6,000 square miles, which is larger than the state of Connecticut. We went out on mokoros, which are dugout canoes made from a sausage tree. There are 2 riders per canoe, plus the guy in the back who stands and pulls us along. A sausage tree has these very heavy fruits, about the size of 2 loaves of bread. If one drops on you, it'd probably knock you out if it didn't kill you. They gave us instructions on riding in them mokoros, such as do not drag your hands in the water, do not go swimming, and when you turn to look back, turn slowly so as not to upset the mokoro. We were right there at water's edge. It was very peaceful gliding along the paths through the grass. Well, so we were taken to this island for a little trek. And before we started on the trek, see, we're not in any jeeps anymore. We're just there. We were given instructions such as stay in a single file. And if we get approached by a hungry animal, do not run away, but stay in a group. Otherwise, the animal will chase you and have you for lunch. We actually saw a lot of animals. Before we started on our trek, we were, and sometimes they were too far away in the shadows for a good picture. We saw impalas, hippos, zebras, more antelopes, and baboons, African fish eagles, vultures, and eagles. These are impalas grazing. We're right there with them. And here are impalas and zebras. Our last day in Botswana was the longest bicycling day of the entire tour, 127 miles. And everybody wanted to make sure that they rode all 127 miles. Since I was the slowest rider, I got up before sunrise, ate an early breakfast, and was the first one out of camp. And here I'm taking my picture right at sunrise. And I call this me and my shadow. I learned how to take a picture with my little camera while pedaling. And this is before iPhones became so popular, so I didn't have one. I just had a small digital camera. I was the last one on to camp, and it was dark after 6:30 at night. And as I approached, I heard cheers and hand clapping. The other riders were applauding me, and I was quite touched. The other riders were acknowledging my accomplishments, which they had done. And many came up personally to congratulate me because they knew I was the oldest and the slowest. This was such a nice group of people, and many of them have been encouraging me the entire trip. Now we go to Namibia. This is the second night in Namibia, and Santa Claus is being pulled on a 2-wheeled sleigh by 2 donkeys who took a ride around the neighborhood that afternoon. You can see the 2 trucks there carrying our tents and our camp gear. One of the trucks was the lunch truck, and the other truck was the dinner truck. In the morning, the lunch truck would be the first one to leave, and they would drive up to where they were going to have set up lunch for us. Then the dinner truck, after the camp was all cleaned up and everybody out, the dinner truck would drive to where the next campsite was. They would keep leapfrogging each other. Here's the lunch truck, and we're having lunch. A gravelly road. This reminds me of West Texas. Some of us took a tour to the Sossusvlei Dunes as part of the Namib Desert. It stretches more than 1,200 miles along the coast of South Africa, from South Africa all the way to southern Angola. The dunes reach as high as almost 1,000 feet, which is like a 10-story building, a 100-story building, I mean. And it's part of one of the oldest and driest ecosystems on Earth. We're near the top. And now we're at the top. After oohing and awing at the sunrise, I went down the side of the dune. Actually, I ran down the side, taking big steps and sinking a couple of feet down the side of the soft sand with each step. It's like running in slow motion. This looks like a low spot of a long ago lake with dead trees. And over here from Recursus, you can see a couple of people there to get a perspective on how big that dune is. Our last country is South Africa. We started off with nice paved roads, and here's one of our campsites. It's like at a roadside park. We saw a lot of grapevines. And not all the roads were paved. Now here is the Atlantic Ocean, and we are looking west. That is our final destination. At the base of the mountain is Cape Town, South Africa. The name of that mountain is called Table Rock Mountain, or Table Mountain. On the last day, at our lunch break, we were all given yellow Tour d'Afrique jerseys. Most of us did a tire dipping ceremony to mark the end of our journey. Here are my two close friends, Ernst Ennis and Ann Gallagher and myself. We called ourselves Team Sweep, as in a broom sweeping the floor, because every day one of the staff would ride behind everybody else to make sure we all got swept up and nobody got lost or forgotten. And so we were swept up a lot being slower riders, and especially me. So we called ourselves Team Sweep. When we convoyed in Cape Town to a place called Market Square, and there was a huge welcoming crowd waiting for us. There were lots of friends and families of the riders that came to welcome us back. There was even a band to welcome us. Next to the amphitheater was a flag for every nation represented by the riders. And we went to our respective flags for pictures. The consulates for many of the countries were there. Then upon a trumpet signal, we walked across the stage and placed the flags in the holders. We were in country alphabetic order, and America was first, and I was chosen to carry the American flag. And Alan Ben was from South Africa, that's him there, and he's carrying the South Africa flag. So I led the parade. Overall, I had a wonderful time. This was an experience of a lifetime, where you slow down and see and experience more things than if you were driving a car. Do I have a favorite country? No. They're all different and fascinating in their own right. One thing that was so positive was the camaraderie of the rider group. Everyone was so helpful and caring and interesting and supportive. I leave you with this final thought. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sail, explore, dream, and discover. And that is the end of my, there we go. I'm back to you. Mike, are you there?
I am. Thank
Good.
you for doing that. John, that was fantastic. I feel like we all got a break from watching the news. And more than that, we got to see a whole lot of things we might not otherwise see. I guess one question that I have for you is this. When you've done this presentation in the past, which I'm sure you have because it's very well polished and organized, what is the most common question that arises afterwards?
Common questions. Well, there were several common questions. One is, did you have any flat tires? And I had 19 of them. And did anybody have any accidents? And yes, there were 2. One of the requirements for this is that you have your medical emergency fly you home insurance. And 2 people, one person got clipped by a truck from Germany, and he had to fly home. He had a broken arm. Fortunately, that was all. But he came the next year to finish the tour. And another one, his name was Paul, and he just got into trouble. He flipped head over heels and broke an arm, and he flew home. And now he went the next year or 2 to finish the trip. And another question was I scared? Never. Even though, I'm out there by myself many times, and more than once I got lost. I obviously was able to find my way, but I would ask people, and again, most people know a little bit of English, and that and the little English and body language will get you where you want to go. So,
well, we sure appreciate your taking the time to share this story with us. We're running out of time, but the good news too is we get to hang out with John all the time in Tai Chi class. So I'm sure if more questions arise, one more way to connect, right? We can chat with him there.
To at the beginning where I said, go to Google and put in John Davis, Africa bicycle. You'll see my full blog with over 1,000 pictures, but you can contact me there through their website and ask whatever questions you want.
Well, we sure appreciate you, sir. Hopefully we can all, maybe even if you're muted, still give John a round of applause. Thank you so much. And until our next Zoom adventure, everyone, thank you for showing up. I'm going to try to figure out how to do something with the recording of this. It's all a learning experience. And we might even be able to put it on our YouTube channel to share with other people. We'll see.
Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Great.
30 minutes, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Oh my gosh.